Goeiedag, dit is Kleurnet. En we gaan vandaag praten over libertarianisme. Libertarians in het Engels. Libertijnen, hoe je het maar noemen wilt. Dat zijn mensen in Amerika die op een bepaalde manier aan de rechterkant van het spectrum staan. Maar wel bijvoorbeeld de burgerlijke vrijheden enorm willen propageren. Mensen die in Amerika ontevreden zijn met het huidige systeem en dat eigenlijk nog Amerikaanser willen op een bepaalde manier. Maar dat betekent ook de vrijheid om bijvoorbeeld marihuana te roken. Om te doen wat je wilt. En het motto daarbij is don't tread on me. Ga niet op me staan. Bemoei je niet met mij. We gaan praten met Donald Maitshausen. Hij komt uit New York en hij is een van de grondleggers van die Libertarian Party beweging. We gaan het gesprek in Engels voeren, maar het is heel interessant omdat juist tussen de twee grote Amerikaanse partijen, de Republikeinen en de Democraten, de Republikeinen worden ook wel de Grand Old Party genoemd, er dus splintergroeperingen zitten die daartussendoor proberen te wurmen. Mensen zoals Steve Gaskin die een groene beweging op gang wil brengen en deze mensen die daar dus al heel lang mee bezig zijn. Donald, we will do this in English. Of course.
Thank you.
Now, you were involved in the Libertarian Party. Now, what is libertarianism, just to start with?
Libertarianism is the belief that everyone has the right to live their life as he or she feels fit to do so, as long as they respect the same right in others. That means you don't have the right to use force and you don't have the right to defraud people.
I'm free to do what I want until I start hurting someone else.
Exactly. That means that we believe in the government that governs best, governs least. That's a quote from Thomas Jefferson.
Okay. Well, let me give you a quote from Jesus Christ, another politician from a little bit few. He said, "Don't do unto others what you don't do unto yourself. You know, treat others like yourself." That's also libertarian?
Yes.
Okay.
We're just saying that if people, want to make a profit, they can make a profit. If they want to smoke marijuana, they can smoke marijuana, as long as they don't hurt anybody else in doing so.
Okay. Now, there's a fundamental difference between this idea of the human condition and what, say, Indian people, indigenous American Indian people, when you ask them, what is your basic tenet in life? What's your basic goal? They said, do not do unto the world what you would not do unto yourself. So instead of taking into as other people, they include the world, which it brings ecology into it. Do you think that's a little wider?
Well, the thing is that what you're talking about, I'm talking about politics, and with the Indians you're talking about a spiritual or religious path.
Well, also an ecological path.
Exactly.
The world around us.
Sure. I'm in the sense that when you're talking about politics, you're saying what people should be allowed to do. While with religion, you're talking about what people ought to do. And I think, for example, that that while everybody should be spiritual, I think that there should be complete separation between church and state.
That's one of the principles there. Okay, now this Libertarian Party, you know a little bit about the European political system. Where would you?
Greens. Well, this is the thing, is that we have things in common with both what you might call right and left. We're very close to, let's say, what people would call classical liberal, in the sense that we don't believe that government should regulate or tax the economy.
Het liberale principe in Holland, that's called. And we have a liberal party, but they are seen very rightish. Of course, the image that we have there, there's the people that always watch in their pocket how much money is there.
Right.
They don't look forward. They don't look in the past. They, as I just mentioned, this Indian idea of looking in the future and saying what will happen to 7 generations down the line. That's not what we see as libertarian here. It's more freedom. Hey, you do what you want, fine.
Well, as I say, I can talk about spiritual things, I can talk about political things, and everybody has, political as well as spiritual values. I just think that in looking at governments all around the country, through history, through the world, you very rarely find a government that pursues any type of moral path.
They all claim to.
They all claim to, but do they?
Yes.
They're very, it's not only that, but they're very corrupt, inefficient, as well as not being humane.
But I don't think there's a single nation where, when the president or the queen or whatever takes office, or has been anointed or whatever, where they don't say, "Let God help us." So God helps all these people, and they make a mess out of it, huh?
Well, I prefer, let's say, the Taoist approach of basically allowing the people within their own genius to discover for themselves what type of society that they want to bring.
Yeah.
Not in a sense that the government should be like, some big parent telling people what to do.
Yeah, that's the libertarian principle. That's what is exemplified by the word "don't tread on me." And when I go to America, I see this snake, and the flags of the libertarian movement of the New England people who said, "Don't tread on me."
Yes.
Stap niet op me. Ga niet op me staan.
Sure.
And that's an idea. Stay away from me.
Right.
That is already pretty American compared to, here, because we have more socialist idea here. But taking this to an extreme, it means who's going to care for the poor and for the handicapped and the people that don't have money to buy medical care?
Well, this is in the sense that I think to have a libertarian society, you need a very spiritual society. People should be aware. One thing that we are proposing as an intermediary step to getting rid of these taxes and welfare laws is, let's say, to have a tax credit for any money that people might give to a charitable project. Also, we've done studies, and that before the government was so invasive, there were many private organizations, lodges, ethnic associations, unions. If you were to join them, they would provide you with burial insurance, health insurance, and basically help you along in times of trouble. And I would like to see more of a return to that. And basically, people just join the group of people that they feel most comfortable with.
So there's a basic opposition between this idea of socialist, where we have little freedom and a lot of security,
right,
and the idea of the libertarians who say little security but a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
Okay, so your choice is for a lot of freedom.
Exactly.
Okay, now in America we think you are free, but give me a few issues that, you still, the army, there's still draft?
No, there hasn't been draft since 1974, and we were involved in that. That is, in a sense, one of the issues that separated us from the conservative movement. We were burning our draft cards during the
You were against the draft and against the Vietnam War.
And against the war.
And we're talking about now, the Kosovo War.
Well, we favor, a much smaller military budget, and we also think that the United States troops should not be stationed in Europe or Japan. We think that Europe has fully recovered from the war and can defend themselves, and that Europeans should handle European problems. Otherwise, you have a danger of imperialism and all types of international incidents, and we think also a rise in terrorism. Okay, and in terms of civil liberties, we don't believe in censorship of the internet or anything else.
What do you mean? Are you in favor of porn on the internet, or what? I actually don't agree. I think freedom of speech and freedom of internet is total freedom. This really is like taken as the issue to snoop around all our mail. Eh?
Yes, exactly.
It's the excuse used to see, not only if you use kiddie porn, but if you use the word subversive or LSD or marijuana or a revolution or I don't know what.
Like the Operation Echelon they have, in which they're checking for certain words used in email messages, and the way people are fighting against that is to liberally use those phrases in ordinary innocent messages, basically to trick them.
Yes.
And we're against censorship. Let's face it, 30-40% of what you see is on cable as well as the internet is porn. It's providing the fuel to grow a new technology, and it is also an indication. If they were to go after the sex and knock that out, political expression would be next. And then we know a lot of political expression is done in sexual terms. I had this one friend of mine, for example, who was working with a group called Stop Prison Rape, and said if you were to censor our conversations, well, a lot of the people that we work with, convicts who have been raped, don't know anything but accept the most graphic forms of expression. And we have to help these people, and the only way we can talk to them is through the internet, because they can have an anonymity. A lot of them are living in remote communities or whatever. So this is in a sense of where, sex and freedom of speech, there is this very strong connection, and it's not just for prurients.
Government involvement in any any communications, therefore, is you don't like that.
Sure.
Now, internet is like also what people call a democratic movement. Yes,
Definitely.
It allows more people to do it. But in fact, we've seen like even in Amsterdam, let's take the marijuana situation, where at the beginning there were a few hippies, they had the coffee shops. Now there is organizations of coffee shops. It has become an organization. It has become, in fact, a club. And if you, as an outsider, you want to start a coffee shop, don't even try. Become a little bit of a mafia situation.
That's unfortunate.
That's unfortunate. Now, but on the internet, we see the same thing. In Holland, we started with, I think, 50 or 100 providers, small guys. Now, the Dutch PDT, I think, illegally has subsidized their own internet activities. They gave it away free long before. They're now giving it away free. We have Freenet, we have Access for All. They, in fact, control 70, 80, 90% of the internet market right now. One company or one complex of company. They've divided it in a few names, World Access and Access for All and different names, Planet Internet. But in fact, you see that the internet has become the domain of the big powers again. And isn't that inevitable?
In our research on monopolies, and I hate monopolies as much as anybody, we've found the only time that monopolies have come into being is where the government has stepped in exchange for political contributions. They dole out various pieces of the pie, which could mean, in a sense, an exclusive territory or, a monopoly of some type.
Yeah, well, in this case, the government has not taken action against the Dutch PDT, which is now a private organization, in using their leveraging their money and their power with the consumer, because the name is known. So why not take our internet brand? It has allowed the PDT to enter into the internet business and now virtually monopolizing it. But isn't that what always happens? If we would liberalize the marijuana trade, wouldn't then in a few years there be one big brand, Marahari now or something like that? The Marahari company probably merged with Reynolds Tobacco, and we would have the same situation.
Well, let's use an analogy. In America, like in Holland, you probably have health food stores which sell organic food. And the health food stores are much smaller than the markets. They only have maybe 5% of the market. And they're usually much more expensive, let's say, than the food that you would have in a supermarket. Yet, in America, at least, the health food business is thriving, even though they're a very small percentage. And
but now big
niches.
companies are buying. Dutch companies are actually buying into the health food chains.
Good.
And they're buying them up.
Good. And the thing is, you can always start a new one. The thing is that what
I'm trying to ask is the human condition. Is that a new thing is on the market. First, you have a lot of people, but then in 5, 10, 20 years. Monopoly kicks in.
Well, the thing is that if you have, let's say, all these small entrepreneurs help develop a market, and if someone comes in who knows how to, let's say, to mass market this item, they can go and do so. Okay, but in Holland as well as the United States,
keep your hands a little bit down, otherwise we see only you.
You have delicatessens.
Yeah.
Who, even though their prices are small, are higher than supermarkets, they do okay. Why? Because they specialize in gourmet items, or their
service.
Or service, or they're in the neighborhood, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I see this in just about any type of thing that you want to buy, or any type of service that you want to buy. You have this, the market finds these solutions.
But you see, internet we already discussed. There is some trends toward monopoly. But go one step further. The internet is going to lead to e-commerce,
right,
and might lead to the decay of the margins. Basically, if I can buy cheaper somewhere there or there, I find it on the internet. So I have to lower my price, he has to lower my price, and we come to a margin that's just bearable, livable. That a retailer, even an electronic retailer, says, okay, 2% is enough for me. Okay, try to make up with volume where he lacks the margin. Isn't this eating away the basic incentive of society, which is profit margins?
Well, I think people like us, we root for the little guy, the guy who doesn't advertise, the guy who's, just breaking through some very interesting ground, territory, and things like that. So I usually, try and buy from the smaller stores and things like that. And the thing is that we're not a goods-oriented economy anymore. We're a service-oriented economy, and service is basically supplied by small firms and independent entrepreneurs.
Yeah, but there's the danger that the internet is going to be so service-oriented that they know everything about you, and that's where your libertarian principles come up again. Like privacy, the market research firms now know everything about you. What you've bought 5 years ago, what kind of color of car, whatever, what you're likely to buy now, and so on and so on. You get all these enormous situations where
I don't really care about if they know what I'm interested in, cars or whatever. And the fact is that these companies do not want to put me behind bars. They don't want to steal money through taxes, etc. They're just trying to sell me something, and I can push a little button that knocks out all their little spamming ads, which I hate as much as anybody. I'm more worried about the state, because the state does not ask your permission. The state is much stronger than a corporation. You can't boycott the government. It's very difficult. But if we know of one bad company, we could organize a large boycott.
Yeah, what happened with Shell?
Sure.
Yeah.
And those are big victories. I mean, a lot of companies...
the brand Spar, where the people said, we don't want you to do this, even if in the end the arguments weren't correct, it was a victory for the consumer.
Right. And while governments, it's just, it's very difficult to boycott a government. I mean, you have to practically have a revolution sometimes, What I like, what's happening right now is a lot of big countries are breaking up into smaller countries. And the smaller the country, the less likelihood they're going to have a war, and the more likelihood that they're going to compete with other countries in terms of, let's say, having a tolerant drug policy. I mean, the smaller countries are the ones that have the tolerant drug policy, not the big ones.
Let me go back to the libertarian principles. Are you in favor of guns?
I don't own a gun myself, but I do think it's a bad idea to have gun control. If, for example, let's say Netherlands and Belgium, the people there were allowed to have guns and each owned a gun. When the Germans invaded, I think the Germans would have had a much harder time of it.
That's one solution. I mean, there's a story here that the guns can be used for crime and whatever, but the principle of the libertarian movement is that if you own a gun or uphold the right to have a gun, there's at least, it's the last weapon against the government.
It is.
We've seen that even that situation with Waco and some other places, some communes in the States that have been invaded by the government, as it now turns on false grounds and with the wrong weapons, and they actually burn the place down. And it's all coming to the surface now.
Right.
That right to own a weapon didn't help the people in Waco. A little bit maybe, but they were burned afterward.
I'm talking about, in a real emergency situation, for example, if we were to have, let's say, a coup, or let's say the president has emergency orders in which he could suspend the Constitution. And we're worried about this ever happening. They pass these decrees, and there's no, they can even pass these decrees without even.
Yeah, but they're passing decrees. Let's take the what they call the militia. Yes.
Sure.
Another right from the Americans that we don't have here is to organize themselves, not only to carry weapons as a last resort against the government, but also to organize themselves in militia. Yeah.
Right.
Militia are burgerorganisaties, civil organization of people who together say, okay, we're going to do this, prevent this, or do this. Militias, armed groups, which is a basic right. Now, the government is very much stepping into that, is it?
Well, it's certainly making the government feel uncomfortable, and this is one of the intentions of the militia movement. The thing is that you could stockpile arms and even train with them. Even that you'll never use them, you just want us to show them that if they do get too ambitious in terms of taking away our civil liberties, people might be willing to do something.
But the government is clamping down, and take the situation now with the millennium.
Always clamping down.
Yeah, but I can't understand it. Americans say, based on the law, we have the right to have militias. Now there is this fear for the millennium, and people have said, let's organize the neighborhoods and first start with, of course, we start with the food and the harmless stuff because we need water and stuff like that. But then someone thinks, if the next neighborhood comes around and takes our food, whatever, let's have some militia to do it. And the government is very strong, and they say, no, you don't have the right anymore because the National Guard is the militia.
Well, there are a lot of people thinking that the government might even use the Y2K problem as a way of instituting martial law. As we know, leaves for the FBI and the police and military and National Guard have been canceled all over the place. So we're thinking...
You mean there will be a lot of armed forces available around?
Yes.
Is there still a reason to fear the millennium?
That depends on who you talk to. There are various people, some of them are libertarians, some aren't, who believe there'll be a general breakdown because of all the computer chips that are used in delivering water and electricity. And that if the computer chips fail, then there's no water and electricity, and people might get panicky in a couple of days.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really know enough about the technology.
Well, the other view is to say we're living in a balloon inflated by stock market prices and very positive economy at the moment, but that any little pinhead obstruction might deflate the balloon, and you have a stock market crash and a house prices crash and stuff like that. Not because it is so dangerous, but because you just need a reason to panic.
Well, what's interesting is that you'll find a lot of libertarians who are in the financial advisement business, and we have seen people who are very big in this field, even complete libertarian, even calling out for legalization and things like that. And some of them, basically, they make money by being alarmists. Now, as you know, there are a lot of people who are green
panic
alarmists.
makers.
Yeah, but you find this in the environmental movement too. And in the way there's, it's necessary. The thing is that how do you, let's say, prove that this situation is really going to happen? And I think it's good for people to be prepared against any bad event that happens. Have a stockpile, maybe of water and dried food. I really don't know what's going to happen January.
But you said that your fear was that if something bad happens, the government might take the opportunity to wipe out whatever
That's possible.
Subversive movements they see, including the libertarians.
I think that is quite possible. I won't say it's probable, but you see, you have to understand too is that sometimes people in the government might do this out of panic or out of even sheer stupidity. And it's difficult to figure out whether, government is doing something because, they're fanatics or because they're evil or corrupt or whatever.
Just stupid. Yeah. How did you get involved with libertarian movement?
Well, as you know, the period of the late 60s was a time of ideological ferment. And I was...
Fun times. Summer of Love, 1967.
But the thing is that we, especially in America, we had to come to some very quick decisions about whether or not we'd be allowed ourselves to be drafted into fight in Vietnam. And of course, it wasn't a time of exposure, to wonderful drugs like marijuana,
LSD was
and marijuana. In fact, we even discovered that a lot of the conservatives who became libertarians were because they had smoked marijuana or done LSD. And basically, we looked at the whole classical liberal thing is government governs best, governs least, no taxes, no regulation. And if we were to be consistent in that means we had to oppose the drug laws. We had to oppose the laws against prostitution. And that, when you really look at the government, basically it acts as a class of people who are trying to exercise a dictatorial role. I mean, bureaucracies have this tendency just to grow, to expand the amount of regulations they have, the amount of people they have. So eventually, it's impossible to live.
The bureaucratic virus, it spreads all over the place. The red tape.
Yeah, and the thing is that you can't function except if you hire some lawyers to watch everything you're doing. And eventually what happens is that the economy grinds down to a halt. The most monopolized sectors are the ones that are the most regulated and monopolized. I mean, regulators are usually come from the industry, right? And they're going to come usually from the bigger industry, the bigger companies. And so what happens is that when that happens to a country, there's a brain drain. The most innovative, creative people, they go to places that they're more open. That was the story of the United States' success.
Because they attracted the people from Germany and from France and from all over the world. And they went to work in the computer industry, and they made that happen.
As well as 100 years ago or 150 years ago, people have always come, and look for opportunities and get away from that whole class system that Europe has had.
Now, so you were in there. You were in the Libertarian Party
right.
from 69.
Yeah,
You
well,
are a member of the
yeah.
SDS, which was the Students for Democratic Society, a radical group, and a member of the Young Americans to Freedom.
Right, right. Yeah, SDS was like the radical student group in the 60s. And the thing was is that I guess I was kind of politically schizophrenic in that, you know, I was opposed to the war and the draft, but I was also opposed to, you know, to taxation and regulation. And I got involved.
You were opposed to everything, but that was a little bit of in fashion in these days.
Yeah, yeah.
Fight whatever you have to fight.
Well, you see, the thing is, SDS started out as practically an anarchist group in the early 60s, and to the process of, well, Marxist infiltration as well as just radicalization, they ended up taking control of SDS, and you had the SDS broke up in 1969 between Maoist factions and Stalinist factions and Trotskyist factions and things like that. And it's sad, you know, but...
well, the revolution attracts strange bedfellows. There's always
right.
very few revolutions
But I
without...
I remember, though, that these Maoists and such, they would tell me, you know, Don, I had hair down to here at that time, Don, get your hair cut, stop smoking pot if you want to be a serious radical. And the thing is that I noticed that one thing that eliminated class consciousness among young people of my time is that whether you were had a trust fund going to Princeton or just working in a factory, is that we got together and we smoked pot and we wore blue jeans and we listened to the same music. And you know, and a lot of us, we worked together in various organizations, and that really, you know, helped us to define who we are and what, you know, what type of culture we have. You see, the thing is
but we lost that. We lost that.
Yeah,
or not, but not totally.
No, not totally. The thing is that the Marxists, there's this danger of basically fighting the last revolution, like, you know, generals fight the last war.
Yeah.
So they had this idea of the 30s, you know, and you know, they wanted us basically to get involved in their type of a very heavy alcohol culture with a lot of basically fights basically about who's going to dominate who and what type, you know, and a lot of rhetoric and, you know, things like that. You know those types. And
heated discussion. In those days, we invaded the students' the university buildings. Endless, man. What a bullshit.
Yeah, it is. And the thing is that I think that, you know, the most important thing, and probably one of the hardest things for radicals to do, is not just to critique the current system, but what type of system do you want to live in? And in the 70s, I did a lot of research in science fiction, any type of ideological science fiction, because it's the literature of the future. And most of the science fiction that I was reading was libertarian or green or anarchist or feminist. And they were talking that basically people should be free, and, you know, and just find new ways of doing things. And this is also too in a lot of the cyberpunk literature as well. And you don't see much Marxist fiction, science fiction, because they just don't have the imagination for it.
Yes, but talking about that,
yeah.
Bill Gibson, or actually Vernon Vinge, came up with this notion of cyberspace.
And
it has changed. Yeah,
he's a libertarian.
Yes, well, Bill Gibson. But the funny thing is, he never worked with a computer before he wrote the book. Yeah, that was really funny, and he had an autistic child, and I know Bill Gibson pretty well, and I was always amazed about his child, his dream. We're living in cyberspace. Internet is here. He never thought about internet, but it's here. We live in this fiction world, in this virtual world where values are virtual, where money is virtual, where characters become virtual. I mean, someone is the president, but we don't feel him anymore. We just see his electronic image.
Yeah.
How about the other side of science fiction is down to earth, sitting around a campfire. That's part of your life too.
I'm a pagan, yeah.
Yes, yeah, sitting there, rainbow gatherings.
Sure.
Yes, smoking some pot, basically singing, dancing, whatever. Being yourself without technology.
Yeah. Sometimes without clothes.
Yeah. Well, that's very liberal. But at the same time, you see that even in those groups, and now let's talk about the rainbow gatherings, they're seemingly without rules. But man, I've never seen a group that's so much against, you can bring a camera, you have to do this. endless meetings about even, well, let me tell you
They're
once.
using customs rather than rules.
But so there's the tribal, the tribal group inflicts their rules very strongly. And I give you one example. I was at some big rainbow gathering in Czechia, and we had a few hundred kilos of dough, to make bread. But it wouldn't rise, and we were not allowed to use either salt or sugar.
Jeez.
Because it wouldn't. So the stuff stayed there and we couldn't bake it and whatever. So I made a decision, we put salt in. Yes? And I told the people, I said, hey, this is crazy. We're letting this stuff, because we can't, there was no yeast or whatever to do it. And then I found this enormous tumult, like, we haven't all agreed. And there were vegans around, we didn't want this and that and that. Man, I've never seen a society where sticking to the rules that were so-called no rules was more dominant. People really enjoying the fact that they could say, you're going against the rules.
Yeah, well, you'll find that, but I do think that rainbows
and having great fun at the same time.
But rainbow people are some of the most tolerant people you'll ever find. I mean, if you want to go
but
there,
still well defined within the tribal rights.
of course. Well, the thing is that when you define yourself as a tribe, or define yourself as anything, you basically are saying you're here and you're not there, and you're going to allow this and not allow that. I want to see a lot of those types of organization around so that everybody can find a family they can fit into. Because a lot of people, they don't like the families.
But you like that. You like Burning Man. You like to go with a group of people and do crazy things.
Yeah. And the thing is
but it's very socialist too, because everybody brings the food. There is no really money going on rainbow gatherings.
Right. But the thing is that we all do it voluntarily. And the thing is that the Rainbow family has been offered food from the federal government, and they have wisely refused it because they know that would come with strings attached. They want to feed their own family.
And that's libertarian again.
That's libertarian. Okay. Yeah.
Now, talking about rainbow and rituals, I mean, where libertarians are free people, and yet you seem to have a fascination with rituals, with the things we do as groups.
I am a libertarian, and there's not too many of us. And I've also decided to be a pagan. Now, in libertarianism, you will find Catholics, Protestants, Jews, New Age people, atheists, agnostics, etc. And I find that.
Can you very briefly define what paganism is?
Pagan is basically the ancient religion,
where the earth plays a major role.
Right. In the sense of the whole idea of Mother Earth. Also, that we value the female principle, the goddess. And a lot of us.
And you value the spiritual nature of all creation.
Yes, I do value that. And of course, it goes very well with 60s values. A lot of us are also very high tech and read science fiction and fantasy. Like Rainbow, what we do is we build these villages for like a weekend or for a week. Pagans do allow for buying and selling of things. We have a lot of various types of jewelry and icons and things like that. Some pagans, for example, believe in the use of sacraments, and some don't, just as you'll find in just about any other group.
Yeah. But so, what's the link between this libertarian movement that you're part of and one of the long time?
There's only one thing I think that all pagans will agree on, is that do what thou wilt and harm ye none.
Law is the law.
Yeah, in the sense that we realize that there's a lot of diversity among us in how we express that. And I find that very similar to the libertarian, in the sense that
but that's the mind that, yes, but this thing, love is the law.
Yeah.
That there is a binding principle among.
Right, but the thing is that it's up to the individual to define how he's going to define it for himself. And the thing is that.
Would you say that's the opposition in your life, that you have libertarians say, well, don't tread on me, and on the other side, this binding principle of there's one uniting love or spiritual awareness?
Yeah. Well, in the course of your life, you'll have economic transactions with people who are complete strangers. But you also, because of your personal needs, will want to get into, let's say, friends and family and organizations or spiritual groups in which that is not a factor. and you make your contributions, you accept things, and you do various types of work with them, and that's to be understood. I mean, it used to be, of course, we all lived in small towns hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago, in which
it's going back to the roots a little bit.
Well,
yeah.
and that we had a personal relationship with everybody in town, but we don't have that anymore, and a lot of us are wondering about well, then where do I fit in society?
Don Maitshausen.
Right.
We talked about libertarianism and not the opposite, but whatever the thing, paganism, rituals, explaining a little bit about American society and politics. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.